Have you ever noticed that many people with a special calling, full of faith and trust in God, face the greatest financial struggles? It almost feels contradictory, doesn't it? After all, if someone is serving the kingdom, praying with perseverance, and living in obedience, why should they go through so much scarcity? Here's the controversy. Many believe that spiritual blessing should always mean immediate material abundance. But what if that's not the truth? What most people don't understand is that there is a hidden purpose behind the trial. God never wastes a season of struggle. Scarcity is not a sign of rejection, but of preparation. It is in this fire that character is shaped, discipline is forged, and spiritual maturity grows. Every unpaid bill, every night spent in prayer, every battle against discouragement is part of a greater process of liberation. In this message, you will discover why the chosen ones face such intense financial crises and how this is directly connected to their spiritual growth and the fulfillment of God's promises. What looks like pain might actually be protection, training, and even a divine calling to a greater mission. Get ready. After this, you will never see your finances the same way again. There are moments when God allows scarcity precisely to teach His children to develop faith beyond the obvious. When everything is abundant, trusting feels easy, but when the bank account is empty, that's when trust is truly tested. In these moments, prayer becomes more sincere and purpose more evident. It's no longer about salary, bonuses, or success, but about recognizing Him as the source. Dependence builds character for those who truly want to walk in the kingdom. Many believe that security comes from a good job or a well-stocked savings account, but that's a dangerous illusion. Those who faced financial trials know even daily bread can become a blessing. In hard times, perseverance is trained and hope becomes fuel. It's as if God whispers, "Don't look at the numbers, look at me." That's when spiritual maturity begins to grow. For example, think of someone who suddenly loses their job. At first, panic dominates, but with discipline, prayer, and humility, this person learns to see opportunities that were once invisible. A small business, a forgotten skill, or even a ministry can be born out of adversity. God transforms scarcity into a school of trust, showing that dependence on Him never fails. This season of dependence isn't only about survival, but about deep learning. Living content in any and every situation is no longer just a phrase. It becomes a daily practice. It's like walking in the dark, trusting God's hand to guide each step. Obedience brings wisdom, resilience, and contentment, things money could never buy. In the end, scarcity forces people to reevaluate their relationship with time, finances, and even desires. What once felt essential suddenly becomes unnecessary. And that detachment makes space for new blessings, new promises, and even greater callings. After all, if He sustains in the little, could He not be preparing something greater? God knows the human heart better than anyone and understands how dangerous pride can be. When someone believes their safety comes only from their own effort, eventually they face trials that break the illusion. Financial struggles are often the hammer that shatters self-sufficiency. It's in that place that faith becomes purer, confidence shifts from me to Him. Scarcity exposes the fragility the ego tries to hide. The person who once bragged about never needing help suddenly realizes they even depend on the prayers of others to stand firm. This is not punishment but a loving call to humility. Anyone who's had to ask for help knows it's not easy on the character, but it's precisely this process that shapes maturity and dependence on God. Take, for example, entrepreneurs who, at the height of success, lose everything in an unexpected crisis. At first, shame and resistance scream louder, but many discover a spiritual strength in the fall that they never knew before. They learn that God's purpose goes beyond balance sheets and profits, and that true wealth is trusting His provision. Though painful, this lesson carries wisdom for life. Breaking pride also prepares the heart for future blessings. Imagine someone receiving prosperity without first being shaped by humility. Riches would become poison, feeding arrogance and distance from the kingdom. But when the ego has been emptied, one learns that every achievement is nothing but God's grace. Obedience and discipline are born from this understanding. So scarcity isn't only about tight budgets but about shaping character. It's as if God is saying, "I must teach you to be small before I make you great." This school of humility, however tough, is essential for those who carry a true calling. And this lesson lays the foundation for the next test: fidelity of character. Scarcity works like a silent exam of faithfulness. When life goes well, it's easy to raise hands and proclaim trust in God. But when finances dry up and the fridge looks empty, that's when faith is truly tested. The inner question becomes, will you keep worshiping even without immediate prosperity? Trials reveal character and spiritual perseverance. Many equate prosperity with faith, as if a healthy bank account equaled divine approval. This mistake has led many to abandon their purpose. Yet the greatest servants of the kingdom went through long seasons of trials. It's in the fire that maturity is born and callings solidify. Only those who've walked the desert know how to value the promised land. For example, imagine someone who stays faithful in tithes and keeps helping others, even when struggling to pay bills. That act of obedience is a clear sign of trust and opens space for God to release wisdom and breakthrough. Being faithful with little proves readiness for much, not just in finances but in ministry, leadership, and relationships. Character is forged in these difficult moments. Perseverance in trials isn't only about enduring, but about growing. Each day hope is kept alive. The person learns their confidence isn't in coins or notes, but in eternal promises. That silent faithfulness generates spiritual strength no one can steal. In the end, tests of faithfulness aren't traps but opportunities. It's as though God asks, "Do you love me for who I am, or for what I give you?" The answer isn't spoken but lived out daily. And those who remain faithful prepare for something greater, alignment with the kingdom rather than the world. Many times God allows scarcity so His chosen ones understand that life isn't about status or comfort, but about aligning the heart with the kingdom. Money can easily become a modern idol. That's why financial trials reveal whether confidence is in possessions or the Creator. When faith is trained in scarcity, priorities are reordered toward eternal values. The world teaches that happiness comes from consumption and display. The kingdom teaches contentment, discipline, and wisdom beyond appearances. Scarcity makes this difference clear. When the paycheck doesn't stretch, what once seemed vital is revealed as unnecessary. The blessing is no longer to have more but to be more, humble, mature, and dependent on God. For example, while many spend hours chasing promotions or status, others invest time in prayer and ministry. That choice, though unseen, transforms a life. Instead of seeking people's approval, the heart aligns with eternal purpose. That detachment from worldly pressure is true liberation and opens doors to growth that money can't buy. Alignment with the kingdom also reshapes how time and money are seen. Every resource is understood as a tool, not an end. Whether the account is full or empty, character stays firm. This obedience reveals maturity and brings hope, for trials are seen as part of God's wise process. In the end, scarcity isn't only difficulty but redirection. It's as though God is saying, "I don't want you living by the world's standard but by mine." And this mindset shift prepares the chosen for a greater mission. Before trusting someone with great responsibility, God prepares them in silence. Joseph is the clearest example. Before ruling Egypt, he experienced slavery and prison. Scarcity wasn't coincidence, it was training. Every tear and every trial forged character and perseverance. Purpose grows in that hidden place, and a person realizes their story is more about the kingdom than personal gain. Financial struggle works as a school of humility and resilience. What looks like lack may actually be fertile ground for discipline and maturity. It's as if God is saying, if you learn to manage little, you will be ready to manage much. The calling isn't only survival, it's victory on a spiritual level, shaping someone to inspire others in faith. For example, someone who learns to live with little while prioritizing prayer and wise stewardship is being trained to bless many later. Countless leaders went through long years of scarcity before stepping into influence. A greater mission requires tested character, and this can only be built when trust outlasts pain. This process proves that trials aren't losses but investments. Each day in hardship teaches lessons no book can give. Perseverance, hope, and obedience become invisible treasures that prepare for future growth. Even scarcity has purpose in the kingdom. In truth, preparation for a greater mission shows that God wastes nothing. The silence of scarcity is rehearsal for the stage of abundance. And when the right time comes, the chosen are ready, not only to enjoy blessing but to use it as a tool of deliverance. Yet for blessing not to become a burden, God adds another element: protection. Scarcity isn't always an enemy, often it is a shield. God knows every heart and sees when wealth could become a trap. Many, without spiritual maturity, would waste or destroy themselves with sudden abundance. Temporary lack then becomes protection. It's as if the Father says, "Not yet, I must prepare your character first." Proverbs reminds us, "Give me neither poverty nor riches, but only my daily bread." This balance shows that blessing isn't found in excess, but in the right measure. Discipline learned in scarcity teaches value for each resource and prevents waste. More than that, it builds humility, pointing to dependence on God as the true foundation of trust. For example, countless people who received sudden fortunes, through lotteries or inheritance, ended in ruin. Without wisdom or contentment, wealth became poison. On the other hand, those who endured scarcity learned to invest, save, and even bless ministries when abundance arrived. The difference wasn't the amount, it was the preparation. This divine protection reshapes thinking. The chosen learned that wealth isn't automatic approval, nor is scarcity rejection. Both are processes for spiritual growth. This maturity builds perseverance, and perseverance brings hope, proof that every stage has purpose. Contentment, in this case, is the greatest wealth. In the end, temporary lack is an invitation to mature before the harvest. True blessing isn't simply receiving abundance, but having wisdom to manage it. God knows shaping the heart matters more than filling the hands. And when the enemy tries to attack a person's calling, he often begins in the area of finances. When someone carries a true calling, they step into an invisible battle. Financial scarcity is often not just circumstances, but part of spiritual warfare. The enemy knows that if he can weaken trust in this area, he can drain hope and distract from purpose. Every trial becomes a battlefield of the spirit. This opposition shouldn't be met with despair, but discernment. Scripture reminds us our fight isn't against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces. The response, then, is built in prayer, perseverance, and dependence on God. Those who understand this don't panic at unpaid bills. They see them as opportunities for faith to grow. For example, many people step into ministry or projects, only to be hit with sudden debt, canceled contracts, or delayed payments. Coincidence? Rarely. It's opposition designed to paralyze. But those who remain disciplined and obedient transform attacks into platforms for maturity. Financial opposition also works as a filter. Many abandon their calling because of difficulty, proving they were more attached to comfort than purpose. But those who persevere discover a spiritual strength far greater than their own. That resistance builds character, wisdom, and even empathy for others in suffering. In the end, each financial attack is an attempt to shift focus from the kingdom to circumstances. But when the chosen understand that even scarcity is part of God's refining, they stay firm. And in that fire, God redefines purpose and brings clarity for the next step. Scarcity, though uncomfortable, has the power to recalibrate the heart. When resources vanish, the person asks, "Why am I doing this? What is my true calling?" In this forced silence, many discover they've been living more for the world system than the kingdom. This season becomes a laboratory of spiritual revelations. Many leaders, pastors, and missionaries only stepped into purpose after losing financial security. At the time, it felt like defeat, but later they saw God had been pushing them into destiny. Scarcity wasn't an end, it was a beginning. It stripped away illusions and aligned them with eternal vision. For example, someone who lived only for wealth suddenly loses everything. In despair, they begin to pray, join social causes, volunteer in missions. To the world, it looks like loss. To God, it's growth. Redefinition of purpose transforms loss into seeds of blessing. This process teaches that money isn't the end but the tool. When obsession with wealth is broken, spiritual maturity blossoms. Contentment becomes more valuable than abundance. Scarcity works as a lens, focusing not on what passes away but on what remains. In the end, every redefinition is an invitation to hope. God uses lack to reveal paths we'd never choose in times of comfort. And once vision expands, the heart begins living by promises instead of circumstances. That's when the need arises to detach from the world's mindset. The world preaches happiness through status, consumption, and speed. But God, in His wisdom, allows scarcity to break that illusion. The chosen must not anchor their identity in what can be bought. Trials teach that real contentment comes from faith and trust in the kingdom. This process feels like liberation. It's as if the person walks free from invisible chains, no longer chasing recognition, but realizing they are already loved and accepted by God. That maturity shifts value from houses and cars to character. And unlike possessions, character is eternal. For example, someone once drowning in debt to maintain appearances later learns to live simply and responsibly after scarcity. This not only brings peace to finances but opens room for spiritual growth. Detachment builds wisdom to discern between needs and illusions. Detachment doesn't mean abandoning responsibilities, it means shifting perspective. Life is no longer about impressing others but serving the kingdom. That shift brings discipline, contentment, and even hope in trials. Each natural sacrifice opens space for spiritual blessing. In the end, scarcity proves that living by the world system is slavery. Detachment reveals freedom, peace, and trust. And from that freedom is born something priceless: genuine empathy. Anyone who spent sleepless nights worrying about bills learns to see others' pain differently. Scarcity shapes the heart for empathy. God uses such experiences to prepare His chosen for ministry, because only those who have suffered can truly comfort. Faith moves from theory to practice, full of compassion. Those who endured hardship don't just offer words, they act. It may be sharing a meal, offering wise advice, or simply praying for someone. These gestures, born from experience, carry weight. Character deepens and hope begins to bloom again. For example, many leaders helping multitudes today once lived through financial struggle. They know the value of groceries, of landing a job, of a door opening at the right time. That memory builds discipline and maturity, ensuring resources aren't wasted but used with purpose. Empathy strengthens community. Those who learn to comfort see the kingdom not as individual but collective. Personal trials transform into ministry and pain into deliverance. Growth accelerates because life is no longer just about oneself, but about impact. In the end, suffering itself becomes God's tool. He wastes no tears but turns every scar into a promise of comfort for others. And along this journey, many realize they're also breaking generational cycles. Often, financial struggles aren't just personal, they're rooted in family history. God raises chosen ones to break patterns of poverty, debt, and mismanagement. It's as if He says, "With you the story changes." This demands faith, perseverance, and radical trust in the kingdom. Such pioneers endure intense trials because they're laying foundations for others. Every tear, prayer, and act of obedience becomes a seed of freedom. What looked like individual suffering was opening doors for future abundance. Children and grandchildren harvest because someone sowed in tears. For example, families trapped in debt for generations may change history when one person embraces discipline and wisdom. They learn to budget, save, and even teach others. That choice doesn't just transform their life, it creates promises for the generations to come. Breaking cycles also requires spiritual endurance. It's not only about habits but about prayer and faith. Daily trust and obedience invite breakthrough. Scarcity shifts from burden to proof of a new chapter being written. In the end, the struggle reveals a greater calling, preparing fertile ground for the next generation. And beyond transforming family, this journey accelerates personal growth. Scarcity, lived with faith, works like a spiritual gym. Every hardship becomes training, every obstacle an exercise. James reminds us, the testing of your faith produces perseverance. What felt like weakness becomes discipline. What seemed like delay becomes growth. In trials, people learn to pray constantly. Every paid bill, every unexpected provision fuels new hope. Experience builds resilient character that doesn't quit easily. Maturity comes from realizing God's timing always brings more than we asked for. For example, someone unemployed for months discovers strength they'd never know in comfort. They learn to cling to promises, stay disciplined in prayer, and see hidden opportunities. Growth goes beyond finances. It's spiritual, emotional, and even ministerial. Scarcity also teaches gratitude for small blessings. A shared meal, a bill paid at the last moment, unexpected help, each becomes a reason for worship. Gratitude shapes the heart for future abundance. Trials turn into testimonies to inspire others. In the end, accelerated growth shines like a flame in the dark. It shows that even in night, purpose remains. And once that fire is part of character, the chosen are ready for something greater, to value blessings yet to come. Those who've known scarcity deeply value every detail of abundance. It's like someone who's been hungry and then treasures even the simplest bread and rice. This training produces discipline, contentment, and trust in God. Future blessings aren't only pleasure but instruments of growth and purpose. Those born in abundance often don't understand the weight of what they have. But the chosen, trained in deserts, see every resource as a promise fulfilled. Gratitude becomes their soil, and gratitude strengthens faith. Nothing is guaranteed except God's care. For example, someone who fought for years to buy a house won't see it as ordinary. They'll treat it with care, view it as testimony, even use it as ministry, opening doors to host and bless. What once was mere property becomes calling. This view only comes from trials before prosperity. Valuing also means not wasting. The chosen learn to steward resources wisely, saving, investing, blessing others. That maturity prevents arrogance and builds character. Money stops being the goal and becomes a kingdom tool. In the end, abundance arrives to meet a heart already humble. And at this point, discipline becomes key because without it, even blessing can be lost. Which is why the next step is learning financial stewardship. Scarcity, though hard, teaches lessons abundance rarely does. When every coin matters, discipline is born, learning to prioritize, plan, and live with wisdom. In this environment, God shapes the chosen, preparing them for greater responsibility. Without this stage, abundance could be wasted or destructive. Lack forces healthy habits. Tracking expenses, planning purchases, distinguishing need from want. These are learned under pressure. Discipline with little becomes the foundation to manage much. Contentment, perseverance, and hope are lessons from the Spirit, not economics books. For example, someone who survived on $500 a month develops ability to multiply when they later receive $5,000. Instead of wasting it, they invest wisely, bless ministries, and save for the future. Scarcity gave them maturity to see money not as an end but a tool. Discipline also strengthens spiritual vision. The chosen realize true freedom isn't in possession, but in obedience. God doesn't entrust abundance to wasters, but to those whose character is ready. Every financial trial is intensive training for stewardship. In the end, scarcity shifts from pain to disguised gift. It proves that finances don't define identity but reveal maturity. And once the lesson is complete, abundance ceases to be risk and becomes multiplied blessing. Now that you understand why so many chosen ones face financial trials, the question is, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you keep seeing scarcity as punishment, or as part of God's greater purpose? Think carefully, could your struggle actually be the key to the growth you prayed for? And more, how long will you let the world system define your worth? God is using this season to shape character, discipline, and maturity in you. But your response decides the outcome. Will you complain or will you turn hardship into prayer, perseverance, and hope? Let me ask you, if abundance came today, would you be ready to manage it with wisdom? Or would blessing become burden? Reflect on that. If this message spoke to you, don't keep it to yourself. Share in the comments what touched you most and what changes you plan to make. Your story might inspire someone in the same battle. Finally, subscribe and activate notifications. Here you'll continue learning about faith, purpose, spiritual growth, and living aligned with the kingdom. This journey is just beginning, and you won't want to miss it.